Picture this. You wake up not in your own bed, but on a slab of stone chilled by the breath of the Carpathian Mountains. Your wrists are raw, torn from thrashing against iron cuffs, now slick with your own blood. You smell rot, not from your own wounds, but from the others' dozens who have vanished just like you, leaving behind only the metallic reek of fear. A rusted door creaks open. Light flickers from a torch, not enough to chase away the dark, but enough to illuminate the silhouette of a woman. She does not walk, she glides. Draped in velvet the colour of clotted blood, Elizabeth Báthory moves like a spectre, and in her hand she carries a silver basin. You do not scream. Screaming has already been tried. It is met with laughter. And worse. You will come to understand that the Countess does not just kill. She studies, she experiments, she collects. You are not a person to her. You are pigment, temperature, texture. You are a fleeting ingredient in her decaying obsession with eternal beauty. What happens next will scar the landscape of Hungarian history, and your bones will be buried in walls that outlast memory. But for now, you wait, naked, bruised, and still alive, for now. Before we journey into these forgotten tales of survival and suffering, if you enjoy uncovering the hidden truths of history, please consider liking this video and hitting that subscribe button for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. To understand the monster, we must first understand the girl. Elizabeth Báthory is born in the summer of 1560 in Nyírbátor in the Kingdom of Hungary. The air is thick with incense and political ambition. She is the daughter of two powerful Transylvanian noble lines, each so deeply interwoven with inbreeding and ancient privilege that madness seems stitched into the family tapestry. Her uncle is said to practice alchemy. Her aunt is whispered to worship the devil in woods thick with fog and moss. Power clings to the Báthory name, not with pride, but with dread. She grows up in the Čachtice Castle, a jagged-toothed fortress nestled among the forests of Upper Hungary. From her earliest years, Elizabeth is surrounded by violence masquerading as order. She watches peasants whipped for mispronouncing noble names. She sees disobedient servants sewn into the bellies of dead horses and left to rot alive. These are not tales meant to frighten her. These are demonstrations. This is power. At age 10, Elizabeth is betrothed to Ferenc Nadasdy, another child of war and aristocracy. At 13, she gives birth to an illegitimate child, fathered by a servant. The infant is quickly taken away, rumoured to be sold to a peasant family far from scandal. Elizabeth says nothing, not a tear, not a scream. She learns then that secrets are safer than truth. By 15, she marries Ferenc in a grand ceremony, drenched in the blood of animals sacrificed for luck. She is gifted Čachtice Castle as a wedding present. She arrives not as a bride, but as a future sovereign. Her new husband teaches her cruelty under the guise of love. Ferenc is a war hero, celebrated for his savagery against the Ottomans. His favourite pastime is tossing captured Turks into iron cages laced with spikes and watching them bleed themselves to death with every panicked movement. He calls it art. He teaches her how to wield knives, not for protection, but for punishment. When he leaves for war, he leaves her in charge, and something inside her begins to split. The line between pleasure and pain dissolves. She starts with small humiliation slaps, hair pulling, forced nakedness in the snow. But as her power grows unchecked, so does her appetite. The body becomes a canvas, a confession, a sacrifice. As Elizabeth matures, whispers follow her like shadows. Young village girls, hired as maids or seamstresses, vanish. Locals blame wolves or sickness, but the truth is far more brutal. The castle's walls absorb the cries of children, flayed for amusement, burned for discipline, or drained for beauty. Still, no one investigates. She is a noblewoman. Her victims are peasants. To question her is to question the natural order. To understand how this was allowed, we must descend deeper, not just into the castle, but into the system that protected her. The castle breathes complicity. Čachtice is not merely stone and iron. It is an organism, a body with veins of servants, blood of silence, and a heart beating with cruelty. When Ferenc dies in 1604, Elizabeth is free of even the thin restraint his presence once provided. Now fully in command, she no longer plays at punishment. She refines it, constructs it, oversees it with clinical precision, and no one stops her. Her staff expands, not with maids or cooks, but with co-conspirators: Ilona Jo, a trusted wet nurse; Dorothea Sentes, known as Dorka, who acts as her personal enforcer; Katerina, another woman seasoned in torture; and Fixco, a disfigured young man with a mind broken by violence. Together, they form a core of brutality, so methodical it becomes ritual. The girls are brought in from surrounding villages. Promises are made: wages, shelter, refinement in the service of nobility. Poor families, desperate and blind to danger, send their daughters with hope clutched tight like a rosary. What awaits them is worse than death. Once inside the castle walls, they are stripped not only of their clothes, but of their names. Their hair is cut. They are locked in basement chambers and examined, not medically, aesthetically. Elizabeth runs her hands along their skin, murmurs to herself about texture and tone. She notes blemishes with disgust. Then the sessions begin. They are tied naked to chairs, studded with blades. Ice water is poured over them. Then they are left outside in the snow until their skin splits. In summer, she has them smeared in honey and left to be devoured by insects. In the cellar, she beats them with spiked rods until the bones beneath rupture. She takes pleasure in cutting the flesh herself, delicate incisions that she watches bleed for hours. Sometimes she forces them to eat their own flesh, sliced from their shoulders or thighs. She is fascinated by the body in pain. She treats it as alchemy, believing that blood, especially from virgins, holds the secret to youth. According to the later testimony of witnesses, she bathes in it. Whether the bath itself occurred is debated by historians, but the horror remains. It was said she stood in large tubs, arms outstretched like a saint in ecstasy, as warm crimson was poured over her pale skin. And the system lets her. Village officials look the other way. Local priests bless her home and pocket generous donations. Nobility visit, eat, drink, toast her intellect, and ignore the smothered cries from below. The Habsburg authorities know of the whispers, but see her as too connected to risk provoking. She is cousin to princes, niece to kings, and her letters to powerful men are eloquent and cold. She is untouchable. The servants who resist disappear. The girls who attempt to flee are hunted down and returned by force. Some try to jump from towers. Others attempt poison. One girl gouges out her own eye in the hope it will make her undesirable. Elizabeth simply orders the other eye removed. When a girl screams during a whipping, her mouth is sewn shut. And yet, within that pit of horror, fragments of resistance spark. Some of the victims form secret bonds. They whisper names to each other, reminders that they are still human. One girl, named Anna, comforts others through psalms muttered in the dark. Another, named Urzi, scratches her name into the floorboards with a tooth broken from being struck. These small acts of remembrance are their defiance. They will not be forgotten, even if their bodies are buried beneath flagstones. Years passed. As Elizabeth's methods grew more refined, so did her boldness. She began targeting daughters of lesser nobility, not just peasants. These girls arrived with servants of their own, letters from fathers, reputations that could not be silenced with bribes, and yet they too vanished. The Countess kept records written in her own hand. Lists of names, dates, injuries, outcomes. These books, never found, were said to name over 600 girls. The psychology of her cruelty is not madness in the way we like to imagine it. She is not a raving lunatic. She is articulate, methodical, and convinced of her superiority. She believes suffering is a test of divine will. She speaks of blood as if it is wine, of bodies as if they are vessels for her renewal. The girls are not people, they are material, their pain is irrelevant. But even as Elizabeth constructs her palace of silence, cracks begin to form. Rumours reach Vienna. A Lutheran minister begins to preach about the she-devil of the north. Mothers stop sending daughters. The number of missing girls becomes impossible to ignore. And then, in 1611, the King of Hungary himself orders an investigation. What happened next would shake the aristocracy to its core. The most powerful woman in Hungary, descendant of kings, would be caught red-handed. The snow that falls in late December of 1611 is dense, wet, and redolent of iron. Soldiers approach Čachtice Castle not in secret, but with the full knowledge of divine and imperial authority behind them. Count György Thurzo, a distant cousin of Elizabeth and Palatine of Hungary, leads the charge. He is accompanied by armed men and the weight of royal sanction. The doors are not barricaded. Elizabeth does not flee. She is found in the middle of her work. Inside the castle's great hall, 4 girls lie sprawled across the floor. One is dead. The others, barely clinging to life, are naked, bloodied, one with open cuts still weeping down her legs. Servants pretend to be shocked, but none move. The walls bleed silence. Elizabeth, dressed in black silk stained near the hem, merely straightens her posture and asks if the king has sent his regards. She is arrested on the spot. What follows is a trial not in the traditional sense, but in documentation, in confessions, in testimonies so detailed that even seasoned inquisitors reportedly turned pale. Over 300 witnesses come forward. Castle workers, village priests, bereaved mothers, and even collaborators provide depositions that are recorded in multiple languages. The accounts converge. Girls were murdered by burning, by mutilation, by freezing, by forced cannibalism, by bloodletting. Elizabeth's accomplices are less fortunate. Ilona, Jo, and Dorka are tortured, their confessions wrung out between screams. Fichko, broken and trembling, admits to crimes so grotesque the court clerk pauses multiple times in his transcription. The punishment is swift. The women have their fingers torn off with hot pincers before being burned alive. Fichko is beheaded, his corpse tossed into the wilderness. Katerina, younger and perhaps less involved, is imprisoned for life. But Elizabeth is never formally tried. Her name is too heavy. To prosecute her openly would embarrass half the nobility of Hungary and rattle the delicate political balance with the Habsburgs, so a compromise is struck. She is walled into a small chamber within Čachtice Castle itself. The windows are bricked over. A slot is left open for food and water. She cannot stand fully upright, cannot see the sun, cannot hear the wind. Her only companions are her memories and the quiet scratching of rats in the walls. The silence that follows is strategic. For 4 years, Elizabeth lives entombed in stone. She writes letters, none of which are answered. She calls out to guards, offering duels for freedom, and receives nothing but the sound of her own voice echoing back. Eventually, she speaks only to herself. On the night of August 21st, 1614, she tells a guard she feels cold. By morning, she is dead. No physician is summoned. No noble funeral held. Her body is buried in the church crypt of Čachtice, but the villagers rise up, demanding her removal. Her corpse is exhumed and secretly buried elsewhere. The location is unknown. Only the castle remains. The consequences ripple outward. The Hungarian aristocracy is forced into a rare reckoning. Elizabeth Báthory had functioned not as a rogue anomaly, but as a product of unchecked privilege, systemic corruption, and a culture that devalued women of lower birth so completely that their mass extermination went ignored for years. The Church, which had long benefited from her patronage, quietly withdraws support. Royal authorities claim credit for justice, despite decades of passive complicity. But the system does not change. Instead, it learns to hide better. In the centuries that follow, Elizabeth becomes myth, the Blood Countess, a vampire, a figure of Gothic horror stripped of historical context. The legends speak of virgin bloodbaths and eternal youth, but forget the names of the girls. Erzy, Anna, Maria, Catalin. They disappear again, this time into fiction. We must remember them. Because what happened in Čachtice is not ancient, it is not fantasy. It is what happens when power is left unchecked, when the suffering of the poor is dismissed as irrelevant, when a system bends its own laws to protect the privileged. These mechanisms still exist. They shift forms, manifesting now in boardrooms, in human trafficking networks, in corrupt governments that disguise torture as policy. Elizabeth Báthory is not a singular monster. She is what emerges when cruelty is cultivated, institutionalized, and then forgotten. And that is the horror we carry with us.